Hello students, in yesterday's class we have seen respiration in human beings. Okay? Today we are going to learn about the mechanism of breathing in human beings, how the process of breathing occurs in human beings. Before going into the topic, let me show the picture out here. I have drawn half of the respiratory system out here. I have drawn larynx and then this trachea and bronchi, each bronchus entering into respective lungs. The bronchi, after entering the lungs, they have divided many times to form bronchioles. These bronchioles have terminated into balloon like structures, these pink colored structures. These pink colored structures, these are the alveoli. Okay? And in each lung there will be approximately 300 million of alveoli. So, total how many alveoli will be there in our lungs? 300 plus 300, 600 millions of alveoli are there in our lungs. And if we spread those alveoli, all alveoli, if we try to spread it, it covers an area of 80 meters square. Okay? So, let us write down some of the points first and then we will go into the exact mechanism of breathing. First, I say alveoli, these are the functional and structural unit of lungs. Okay? And I said how many? Approximately 300 millions of alveoli present. This is one point, this is another point, present in each lung. This symbol is the symbol of approximation, students. So, altogether there will be approximately 600 millions of alveoli. And if we spread alveoli, all alveoli of our lungs, it will cover an area of 80 meters square. So, you can imagine, students, how efficient our alveoli or lungs are in taking in oxygen, okay, from the atmospheric air. So, these are some facts regarding alveoli. Now, let us go into the mechanism of breathing. Now, yesterday we learned that breathing, it occurs in two phases, isn't it? Breathing occurs in two phases. What are the phases? The first phase is called inhalation, which is also called inspiration, and the second phase is called exhalation or expiration. Okay? Now, so we will talk about inhalation first, how do inhalation operates. Now, during inhalation we will start off with this diaphragm. Okay? This structure we have already seen yesterday. When we inhale, okay, this diaphragm is made up of muscles. Okay? During inhalation, the muscles of the diaphragm, they contract. Okay? When the muscles of the diaphragm contract, that becomes flat. It will become flat here. So, when it becomes flat, what happens? This is rib, students. This I have drawn to show ribs. I cannot draw ribs out here because if I drew ribs, our picture will become quite confusing. Okay? So, just imagine these are the ribs. Now, when this diaphragm flattens, the ribs which are also connected with the diaphragm, these will be lifted upwards. Okay? They will be lifted upwards. When the ribs are lifted upwards, the cavity, this cavity which is present in our chest, it is known as thoracic cavity or simply chest cavity. Okay. So, when the ribs will be lifted outwards or upwards, what happens? The volume inside the thoracic cavity increases, volume increases. Now, when the volume increases, what happens? These lungs, they will also relax, isn't it? They will also relax and they will also expand. When the lungs will expand, what happens? The pressure inside the lungs, that will decrease. That we have seen in physics, that volume is inversely proportional to pressure, isn't it? So, pressure will decrease inside. When the pressure inside the lungs will decrease, suction force will increase, suction force will increase. So, now the fresh air from the atmosphere, they will be sucked in by that suction force. That fresh air, they will be sucked into the lungs through the respiratory tract. Yesterday we talked about respiratory tract, which begins from the nostrils and end in trachea. Okay. So, through that respiratory tract, the fresh air from the atmosphere will be sucked into the lungs. Okay. Now, that air will contain large amount of oxygen. Okay. So, we will try to write these points into word diagram. So, during inhalation, what happens? During inhalation, diaphragm muscles contract. When the diaphragm muscles contract, what happens? The diaphragm becomes flat. When the diaphragm becomes flat, what happens? The ribs will be pushed outwards. Ribs are pushed upwards. We can write upwards also, because you also can do it at our home. Okay, try to inhale and see what happens in our chest area. So, ribs are pushed upwards, and when the ribs are pushed upwards, the volume in thoracic cavity increases. This means the space in the thoracic cavity, it increases. Now, when the volume in the thoracic cavity increases, what happens? Pressure, let me write down here. Pressure in lungs decreases. Okay, pressure in lung decreases, and due to the decrease in the pressure in the lungs, what happens? The air will be air which has oxygen. Air is sucked in. So, this is how inhalation occurs in our respiratory system. First, diaphragm muscles, they will contract. This contraction will result in flattening of the diaphragm. When the diaphragm will flatten, it will also it will push the ribs upwards. Now, these ribs are connected with each other and with the diaphragm through one special tissue, that is called intercostal muscles. Those intercostal muscles, contraction and relaxation of those intercostal muscles actually result into the pushing of ribs upwards and downwards. Okay. So, when the diaphragm becomes flat, the ribs will be lifted up. When the ribs are lifted up, the chest cavity, the volume or the space inside the chest cavity increases. When the chest cavity's space increases, the pressure inside the lungs will also increase. Okay. When the pressure increases, what happens? Pressure will decrease. Pressure inside the lungs will decrease, because volume is inversely proportional to pressure. Now, when the pressure inside the lungs will decrease, suction force will increase. Now, when the suction force is increased, fresh air which contains oxygen will be sucked into the lungs, and through this respiratory tract and these organs, they will ultimately reach into the alveoli. Now, what happens in alveoli? We will see after 1 to 2 minutes. Now, let us see what happens in expiration. Okay. In expiration, the opposite of these things happen. let us write down second phase, which is expiration. Second phase is expiration. Expiration or exhalation. I am not writing exhalation. Now, during expiration also we will start off with the diaphragm. Okay. During expiration, this diaphragm is in its original dome shape. See, when the diaphragm is in relaxed form, it is in its original form, which is a dome shape. See, it is in a dome shape, it is in the relaxed form. When the diaphragm is in a relaxed form, the ribs will be pushed downwards, the ribs will be squeezed in. Okay. Now, when the ribs will be squeezed in, what happens to the thoracic cavity, the volume of the thoracic cavity? The volume of the thoracic cavity, that will decrease. Okay. When the thoracic cavity's volume decreases, what happens to the lungs? The lungs which were previously like this, they will also be squeezed in, isn't it? Now, when the thoracic cavity's volume decreases, the volume of the lungs will also decrease, due to which what happens? The pressure inside the lungs, that will increase. Okay, pressure inside the lungs, that will increase. When the pressure inside the lungs will increase, what happens to the air that is present inside the lungs? They will be expelled out. Okay, the air from the lungs will be expelled out through the nostrils, and this is known as expiration. So, let us write down here also. So, during expiration or exhalation, what happens? Diaphragm muscles relax. When they relax, they assume their dome shape, isn't it? Now, when these diaphragm muscles relax, what happens? Ribs will be squeezed in. Okay, they will be squeezed in. When the ribs will be squeezed in, what happens to the thoracic cavity? The volume of thoracic cavity decreases. So, if the volume decreases, what happens to the pressure that is inside the lungs? This will result in the increase in pressure in lungs. Now, why the pressure inside the lungs should be increased? Because when the thoracic cavity becomes squeezed in, the lungs will also be squeezed in, due to which a pressure is created. The pressure is much higher. Okay, that is why the pressure inside the lungs will increase. And when the pressure in the lungs will be increased, what happens to the air? Air from the lungs, air is thrown out, through nostrils, and which is known as through nostrils. Write down here, nostrils. Okay. Once again, students, when the pressure in the lungs increases, the air that is present inside the lungs, that will be squeezed out. They will be thrown out of the lungs to the outside via nostrils. Okay. Now, this is exhalation. Now, let us see what happens when the oxygen comes into the alveoli. How does actually oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged in lungs and the capillaries? Yesterday we saw this is terminal bronchiole. This terminal bronchiole, it ended up with a balloon like structure. This balloon like structure, it was called alveolus, isn't it? This is terminal bronchiole. Okay. And here we also saw that each alveolus is richly supplied with blood capillaries, we saw yesterday, isn't it? Let me write down here. This is supposing one blood capillary, okay, that is around the alveolus. Now, this capillary, it is coming from the body cells, okay. This capillary, it is running throughout the cells. So, if they are coming, this is cell, supposing these are the cells, let me make some structures here, supposing these are the body cells. Okay. Now, these body cells, they have carbon dioxide in them initially, they have carbon dioxide. So, this carbon dioxide will be diffused into the capillaries, okay, into the capillaries. These capillaries have blood in them, isn't it? Now, why carbon dioxide has to be diffused into the capillaries? Because actually this blood, it is made up of 4 components, okay. It is made up of 4 things. What are they? They are plasma, second is red blood corpuscles, third is white blood cells, and fourth is platelets. Okay. Now, this plasma, it contains around 90 to 95% of water, 95% water, and this carbon dioxide is readily soluble in water. Okay. Carbon dioxide is easily soluble, it will be soluble in water easily. This is readily soluble in water. So, the carbon dioxide from the cells will diffuse into the blood plasma. Okay. So, this plasma will actually carry carbon dioxide from the cells to the capillaries. From the capillaries, those carbon dioxide will be given to the alveoli during expiration, inspiration. Okay. So, now this will contain carbon dioxide, but during inhalation what is happening? During inhalation, oxygen is coming inside the alveolus, isn't it? Oxygen is coming in. Now, this oxygen also has to have something which will carry it. Okay. Now, RBC, we have RBC for that. RBC contains a red pigment which is known as hemoglobin. It contains hemoglobin. Hemoglobin has actually iron in them. Okay. And this hemoglobin is the respiratory pigment in humans. It is the respiratory pigment. Because iron is present in the hemoglobin, what happens? This hemoglobin has a strong affinity with oxygen. That means it is very friendly with oxygen. Okay. So, this hemoglobin will bind with the oxygen. So, this blood will now have oxygen in them, which is coming from the alveolus, because this capillary, it has blood. In that blood we have RBC. RBC has hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is very friendly with the oxygen. Oxygen which is present in the alveolus. So, oxygen will come to hemoglobin which is running in the capillaries. Okay. So, now here the exchange of gas occurs in this place. Okay. So, what happens? Carbon dioxide will be given, let me make right there. Now, oxygen is coming in here through inhalation. Okay. Through exhalation, what is happening? Carbon dioxide is being given out to the alveoli. Here this carbon dioxide is given out. Oxygen has a strong affinity with the RBC. So, this oxygen will come to the blood that is running in the capillaries, and the blood which has carbon dioxide, they will diffuse into the alveoli. Okay. And from the alveoli they will be expelled out, and this oxygen which has been given to the blood capillaries, now these blood capillaries, they will carry this oxygen rich gas, air, oxygen rich air to the different parts of our cell again, because the cell will require oxygen again. Okay. So, they will be given to the cells, and in this cell the oxygen will be utilized. This oxygen will be utilized to break what? To break food, isn't it? To break the soluble simple food which has been absorbed, this food, and during the breaking of this food, what is happening? Energy is being generated along with carbon dioxide plus water, and this is the respiration process. Okay. Exchange of gas occurs between the alveolus and the blood capillaries. Oxygen will be given by the alveoli to the blood in the capillaries, and the carbon dioxide which is present in the capillaries will be given to the alveoli. From the alveoli, through expiration, the carbon dioxide will be expelled out, and from these capillaries the oxygen will be carried to all cells. Okay. In those cells we have mitochondria there, isn't it? So, these cells will carry out the function of breaking down the absorbed food. In the nutrition portion we have studied about absorption and digestion of food. Okay. That food has also been reached to the cells by the blood only. Now, that food will be broken down by the oxygen which is again being carried out by the capillaries. Okay. So, during the breakdown of that food, energy in the form of ATP along with carbon dioxide and water will generate. Again this carbon dioxide will be accumulated in the cells. From the cells they will diffuse in the capillaries, again the same process occurs. So, this way the breathing cycle repeats. Okay. So, this is how the mechanism of breathing is accomplished in our respiratory system. Now, when we expire, it is not that the lungs will become empty. Okay. A little volume of air will still be there in the lungs, in our lungs, and that volume of air which remains in the lungs even after expiration or exhalation is known as residual gas. We have to understand that our lungs are never empty. Okay. If it is empty, they will collapse. So, that residual volume will prevent the lungs from collapsing, because a little volume of air even after expiration they will be there in the lungs, and that is known as residual volume. So, let us write down what is residual volume. Residual volume. So, it is the volume of air present in the lungs after expiration, and it makes sure, and this residual volume makes sure that lungs are never, therefore lungs are never empty. Lungs are never empty. Now, we have finished up with the respiratory system in human beings also. I will be posting some of the questions related to these two chapters, nutrition and respiration, along with the videos that will be sent for your learning. Okay. And I hope you all are maintaining your notebook very systematically along with the dates, chapter name, topic name, maybe drawing the diagrams also which I am drawing here. Okay. Trying to draw the diagrams also, and if you are coming across some doubts during the lecture session, please note them down also in your notebook, and please feel free to ask. Thank you.